We are back. I mean, I had some trouble. So where we stopped at the dining room. The breakfast consisted of a certain number of dishes, the contents of which were furnished by the sea alone, and I was ignorant of the nature or mode of preparation of some of them. I was ignorant of the mode of preparation of some of them. I acknowledged that they were good, but they had a peculiar flavor, which I easily became accustomed to. These different elements appeared to me to be rich in phosphorus, and I thought they must have a marine origin. Captain Nemo looked at me. I asked him no questions, but he guessed my thoughts, and answered of his own accord the questions which I was burning to address him. The greater part of these dishes are unknown to you, he said to me. However, you may partake of them without fear. They are wholesome and nourishing. For a long time I have renounced the food of the earth, and I am never ill now. My crew, who are healthy, are fed on the same food. So, said I, all these eatables are the produce of the sea. Yes, Professor, the sea supplies all my wants. Sometimes I cast my nets in tow, and I draw them in ready to break. Sometimes I hunt in the midst of this element, which appears to be inaccessible to man, and quarry the game which dwells in my submarine forests. My flocks, like those of Neptune's old shepherds, graze fearlessly in the immense prairies of the ocean. I have a vast property there, which I cultivate myself, and which is always sown by the hand of the Creator of all things. I can understand perfectly, sir, that your nets furnish excellent fish for your table. I can understand also that you hunt aquatic game in your submarine forests, but I cannot understand at all how a particle of meat, no matter how small, can figure in your bill of fare. This, which you believe to be meat, Professor, is nothing else than a fillet of turtle. Here are also some dolphin's livers, which you take to be ragout of pork. My cook is a clever fellow, who excels in dressing these various products of the ocean. Taste all these dishes. Here is a preserve of holoturia, which a Malay could declare to be unrivaled in the world. Here is a cream, of which the milk has been furnished by the cetacea, and the sugar by the great fucus of the North Sea. And lastly, permit me to offer you some preserve of anemones, which is equal to that of the most delicious fruits. That's quite a bunky. I tasted more from curiosity than a connoisseur, but Captain Nemo enchanted me with his extraordinary stories. You like the sea, Captain? Yes, I love it. The sea is everything. It covers 7/10 of the terrestrial globe. Its breath is pure and healthy. It is an immense desert, where man is never lonely, for he feels life stirring on all sides. The sea is only the embodiment of a supernatural and wonderful existence. It is nothing but love and emotion. It is the living infinite, as one of your poets has said. In fact, Professor, nature manifests herself in it by her three kingdoms: mineral, vegetable, and animal. The sea is the vast reservoir of nature. The globe began with sea, so to speak, and who knows if it will not end with it? In it is supreme tranquility. The sea does not belong to despots. Upon its surface, man can exercise unjust laws, fight, tear one another to pieces, and be carried away with terrestrial horrors. But 30 feet below its level, their reign ceases, their influence is quenched, and their power disappears. Ah, sir, live in the bosom of the waters. There only is independence. There I recognize no masters. There I am free. Captain Nemo suddenly became silent in the midst of this enthusiasm, by which he was quite carried away. For a few moments he paced up and down, much agitated. Then he became more calm, regaining his accustomed coldness of expression, and turning towards me. "Now, Professor," said he, "if you wish to go over to the Nautilus, I am at your service." Captain Nemo rose. I followed him. A double door, contrived at the back of the dining room, opened, and I entered a room equal in dimensions to that which I had just quitted. It was a library. High pieces of furniture of black violet ebony inlaid with brass supported upon their wide shelves a great number of books uniformly bound. They followed the shape of the room, terminating at the lower part in huge divans, covered with brown leather, which were curved to afford the greatest comfort. Light movable desks made to slide in and out at will allowed one to rest one's book while reading. In the center stood an immense table, covered with pamphlets, amongst which were some newspapers, already of old date. The electric light flooded everything. It was shed from four unpolished globes, half sunk in the volutes of the ceiling. I looked with real admiration at this room, so ingeniously fitted up, and I could scarcely believe my eyes. "Captain Nemo," said I to my host, who had just thrown himself on one of the divans. "This is a library which would do honor to more than one of the continental palaces, and I am absolutely astounded when I consider that it can follow you to the bottom of the seas." "Where could one find greater solitude or silence, Professor?" replied Captain Nemo. "Did your study in the museum afford you such perfect quiet?" "No, sir, and I must confess, it is a very poor one after yours. You must have 6,000 or 7,000 volumes here." 12,000, Mr. Aronnax. "These are the only ties which bind me to the earth. But I had done with the world on the day when the Nautilus plunged for the first time beneath the waters. That day I bought my last volumes, my last pamphlets, my last papers, and from that time I wish to think that men no longer think or write. These books, Professor, are at your service. Besides, and you can make use of them freely." I thanked Captain Nemo and went up the shelves of the library. Works of science, morals, and literature abounded in every language, but did not see one single work on political economy. That subject appeared to be strictly proscribed. Strange to say, all these books were irregularly arranged, in whatever language they were written. And this medley proved that the captain of the Nautilus must have read indiscriminately the books which he took up by chance. "Sir," said I to the captain, "I thank you for having placed this library at my disposal. It contains treasures of science, and I shall profit by them." "This room is not only a library," said Captain Nemo. "It is also a smoking room." "A smoking room!" I cried. "Then one may smoke on board?" "Certainly." "Then, sir, am I forced to believe that you have kept up a communication with Havana?" "Not any," answered the captain, "except the cigar, Mr. Aronnax, and though it does not come from Havana, you will be pleased with it, if you are a connoisseur." I took the cigar which was offered me. Its shape recalled the London ones, but it seemed to be made of leaves of gold. I lighted it at a little brazier, which was supported upon an elegant bronze stem, and drew the first whiffs with the light of a lover of smoking who has not smoked for 2 days. "It is excellent," said I. "But it is not tobacco?" "No," answered the captain. "This tobacco comes neither from Havana nor from the East. It is a kind of seaweed, rich in nicotine, which the sea provides me, but somewhat sparingly." At that moment Captain Nemo opened the door which stood opposite to that by which I entered the library, and I passed into an immense drawing room splendidly lighted. It was a vast four-sided room, 30 feet long, 18 wide, and 15 high. A luminous ceiling, decorated with light arabesques, shed a soft clear light over all the marvels accumulated in this museum, for it was in fact a museum in which an intelligent and prodigal hand had gathered all the treasures of the nature and art. With the artistic confusion which distinguishes a painter's studio, 30 first-rate pictures, uniformly framed, separated by the bright drapery, ornamented the walls, which were hung with tapestry of severe design. I saw works of great value, the greater part of which I had admired in the special collections of Europe, and in exhibitions of paintings. The several schools of the old masters were represented by a Madonna of Raphael, a Virgin of Leonardo da Vinci, a nymph of Correggio, a woman of Titan, an Adoration of Veronese, an Assumption of Murillo, a portrait of Holbein, a monk of Velasquez, a martyr of Ribera, a fair of Rubens, 2 Flemish landscapes of Teniers, 3 little genre pictures of Gerald Dahl, Metsu, and Paul Potter, 2 specimens of Jericault and Proudhon, and some sea pieces of Blackhausen and Verne. Amongst the works of modern painters were pictures with the signatures of Delacroix, Ingres, Decamps, Troyon, Meissonier, Daubigny, etc., and some admirable statues in marble and bronze, after the finest antique models, stood upon pedestals in corners of this magnificent museum. Amazement, as the captain of the Nautilus had predicted, had already begun to take possession of me. "Professor," said this strange man, "you must excuse the unceremonious way in which I receive you, and the disorder of this room." "Sir," I answered, "without seeking to know who you are, I recognize in you an artist." "An amateur, nothing more, sir. Formerly I loved to collect these beautiful works created by the hand of man. I sought them greedily and ferreted them out indefatigably, and I have been able to bring together some objects of great value. These are my last souvenirs of that world which is dead to me. In my eyes, your modern artists are already old. They have 2 or 3 thousand years of existence. I confound them in my own mind. Masters have no age. And these musicians, said I, pointing out some works of Weber, Rossini, Mozart, Beethoven, Haydn, Meyerbeer, Harold, Wagner, Albert, Gounod, and a number of others, scattered over a large model of piano organ which occupied one of the panels of the drawing room. These musicians, replied Captain Nemo, are the contemporaries of Orpheus, for in the memory of the dead all chronological differences are effaced. And I am dead, Professor, as much dead as those of your friends who are sleeping 6 feet under the earth. Captain Nemo was silent, and seemed lost in a profound reverie. I contemplated him with deep interest, analyzing in silence the strange expression of his countenance. Leaning on his elbow against an angle of a costly mosaic table, he no longer saw me. I had forgotten my presence. I did not disturb this reverie, and continued my observation of the curiosities which enriched this drawing room. Under elegant glass cases, fixed by copper rivets, were classed and labelled the most precious productions of the sea which had ever been presented to the eye of an naturalist. My delight as a professor may be conceived. The division containing the zoophytes presented the most curious specimens of the 2 groups of Polyphy and Echinoderms. In the first group, the Tupirobes, the Tubiphores, were gorgonas arranged like a fan, soft sponges of Syria, mysis of the Moluccas, Phenatulas, an admirable Virgularia of the Norwegian seas, variegated Umbularia, Alcyonaria, a whole series of madrepores, which my master Milne Edwards has so cleverly classified, amongst which I remarked some wonderful Frabellimaeoculinae of the island of Bourbon, the Neptuniscar of the Antilles, superb varieties of corals, in short, every species of those curious polyphy of which entire islands are formed, which will one day become continents. Of the echinoderms, remarkable for their coating of spines, Asteri, sea stars, Pantacinae, Comatulus, Astephons, Echini, Voloturi, etc., represented individually a complete collection of this group. A somewhat nervous conchiologist would certainly have fainted before other more numerous cases, in which were classified the specimens of mollusks. It was a collection of inestimable value, which time fails me to describe minutely. Amongst these specimens, I will quote from memory only the elegant royal rammerfish of the Indian Ocean, whose regular white spots stood out brightly in a red and brown ground, an imperial spondyle, brightly colored, bristling with spines, a rare specimen in the European museums. I estimated its value at no less than 1,000 euros. A common hammerfish of the seas of New Holland, which is only procured with difficulty, exotic bucardia of Senegal, fragile white bivalve shells, which a breath might shatter like a soap bubble. Several varieties of the aspergillum of Java, a kind of calcareous tube, edged with leafy folds, and much debated by amateurs. A whole series of trochee, some greenish yellow, found in the American seas, others a reddish brown, natives of Australian waters, others from the Gulf of Mexico, remarkable for their imbricated shell steadily found in the southern seas. And last, the rarest of all, the magnificent spur of New Zealand, and every description of delicate and fragile shells to which science has given appropriate names. Apart, in separate compartments, were spread out chaplets of pearls of the greatest beauty, which reflected the electric light in little sparks of fire. Pink pearls torn from the Pinna marina of the Red Sea, green pearls from the Haliotide iris, yellow, blue, and black pearls, the curious productions of the diver mollusks of every ocean, and certain mussels of the watercourses of the north. These seem very pretty. Lastly, several specimens of inestimable value which had been gathered from the rarest pintadines. Some of these pearls were larger than a pigeon's egg, and were worth as much, and more than that which the traveller Tavernier sold to the Shah of Persia for 3 millions, and surpassed the one in the possession of the Imam of Muscat, which I had believed to be unrivalled in the world. It's quite the collection. Therefore, to estimate the value of this collection was simply impossible. Captain Nemo must have expended millions in the acquirement of these various specimens, and I was thinking that what source he could have drawn from to have been able thus to gratify his fancy for collecting, when I was interrupted by these words. "You are examining my shells, Professor? Unquestionably, they must be interesting to a naturalist, but for me they have far greater charm, for I have collected them all with my own hand, and there is not a sea on the face of the globe which has escaped my researches. I can understand, Captain, the delight of wandering about in the midst of such riches. You are one of those who have collected their treasures themselves. No museum in Europe possesses such a collection of the produce in the ocean. If I exhaust my admiration upon it, I shall have none left for the vessel which carries it. I do not wish to pry into your secrets, but I must confess that this Nautilus, with the motive power which is confined in it, the contrivances which enable it to be worked, the powerful agent which propels it, always excite my curiosity to the highest pitch. I see suspended on the walls of this room instruments of whose use I am ignorant. You'll find the same instruments in my own room, Professor, where I shall have much pleasure in explaining their use to you. But first, come and inspect the cabin which is set apart for your own use. You must see how you will be accommodated on board the Nautilus." I followed Captain Nemo, who, by one of the doors opening from each panel of the drawing room, regained the waist. He conducted me towards the bow, and there I found not a cabin, but an elegant room, with a bed, dressing table, and several other pieces of furniture. I could only thank my host. "Your room adjoins mine," said he, opening a door, "and mine opens into the drawing room that we have just quitted." I entered the captain's room. It had a severe, almost a monkish aspect. A small iron bedstead, a table, some articles for the toilet, the whole lighted by a skylight. No comforts, the strict necessaries only. Captain Nemo pointed to a seat. "Be so good as to sit down," he said. I seated myself, and he began thus. Chapter 11. All by Electricity. Sir, said Captain Nemo, showing me the instruments hanging on the walls of his room. Here are the contrivances required for the navigation of the Nautilus. Here, as in the drawing room, I have them always under my eyes, and they indicate my position and exact direction in the middle of the ocean. Some are known to you, such as the thermometer, which gives the internal temperature of the Nautilus, the barometer, which indicates the weight of the air and foretells the changes of the weather, the hygrometer, which marks the dryness of the atmosphere, the storm glass, the contents of which, by decomposing, announce the approach of tempests. The compass, which guides my course, the sextant, which shows the latitude by altitude of the sun, the chronometers, by which I calculate the longitude, and glasses for day and night, which I use to examine the points of the horizon, and the Nautilus rise to the surface of the waves. These are the usual nautical instruments, I replied, and I know the use of them, but these others, no doubt, answer to the particular requirements of the Nautilus. This dial with the movable needle is a manometer, is it not? It is actually a manometer, but by communication with the water, whose external pressure it indicates, it gives our depth at the same time. And these other instruments, the use of which I cannot guess. Here, Professor, I ought to give you some explanations. Will you be kind enough to listen to me? He was silent for a few moments. Then he said, There is a powerful agent, obedient, rapid, easy, which conforms to every use and reigns supreme on board my vessel. Everything is done by means of it. It lights it, warms it, and is the soul of my mechanical apparatus. This agent is electricity. Electricity? I cried in surprise. Yes, sir. Nevertheless, Captain, you possess an extreme rapidity of movement, which does not agree with the power of electricity. Until now, its dynamic force remained under restraint, and has only been able to produce a small amount of power. Professor, said Captain Nemo, my electricity is not everybody's. You know what seawater is composed of. In 1,000 grams are found 96.5% of water and about 2.5% of chloride of sodium. Then, in a smaller quantity, chlorides of magnesium and potassium, bromide of magnesium, sulfate of magnesia, sulfate, and carbonate of lime. You see, then, that chloride of sodium forms a large part of it. So it is this sodium that I extract from seawater, and of which I compose my ingredients. I owe all to the ocean. It produces electricity, and electricity gives heat, light, motion, and, in a word, life to the Nautilus. But not the air you breathe? Oh, I could manufacture the air necessary for my consumption, but it is useless because I go up to the surface of the water when I please. However, if electricity does not furnish me with air to breathe, it works at least the powerful pumps that are stored in spacious reservoirs, and which enable me to prolong at need, and as long as I will, my stay in the depths of the sea. It gives me a uniform and unintermittent light, which the sun does not. Now look at this clock. It is electrical, and goes with a regularity that defies the best chronometers. I have divided it into 24 hours, like the Italian clocks, because for me there is neither night nor day, sun or moon, but only that factitious light that I take with me to the bottom of the sea. Look, just now, it is 10 o'clock in the morning. Exactly. Another application of electricity. This dial ringing in front of us indicates the speed of the Nautilus. An electric thread puts it in communication with the screw, and the needle indicates the real speed. Look, now you are spinning along with a uniform speed of 15 miles an hour. It is marvelous. And I see, Captain, you were right to make use of this agent that takes the place of wind, water, and steam. I have not finished, Mr. Aronnax, said Captain Nemo, rising. If you will follow me, you will examine the stern of the Nautilus. Really, I knew already the anterior part of the submarine boat, of which this is the exact division, starting from the ship's head. The dining room, 5 yards long, separated from the library by a watertight partition. The library, 5 yards long. The large drawing room, 10 yards long, separated from the captain's room by a second watertight partition. The said room, 5 yards in length, mine 2.5 yards, and lastly, reservoir of fire, 7.5 yards, that extended to the bows. Total length of 35 yards, or 105 feet. The partitions had doors that were shut hermetically by means of India rubber instruments, and they ensured the safety of the Nautilus in case of a leak. I followed Captain Nemo through the waist, and arrived at the center of the boat. There was a sort of well that opened between two partitions. An iron ladder, fastened with an iron hook to the partition, led to the upper end. I asked the captain what the ladder was used for. It leads to the small boat, he said. What? Have you a boat? I exclaimed in surprise. Of course, an excellent vessel, light and insubmersible, that serves either as a fishing or a pleasure boat. But then, when you wish to embark, you are obliged to come to the surface of the water? No, this boat is attached to the upper part of the hull of the Nautilus and occupies a cavity made for it. It is decked, quite watertight, and held together by solid bolts. This ladder leads to a manhole made in the hull of the Nautilus that corresponds with similar hole made in the side of the boat. By this double opening, I get into the small vessel. They shut the one belonging to the Nautilus, I shut the other boat that goes up the surface of the sea with prodigious rapidity. I then open the panel of the bridge, carefully shut till then. I mast it, hoist my sail, take my oars, and I'm off. But how do you get back on board? I do not come back, Mr. Aronnax. The Nautilus comes to me. By your orders? By my orders. An electric thread connects us. I telegraph to it, and that is enough. Really, I said, astonished at these marvels. Nothing can be more simple. That seems dangerous in case the thread breaks. After having passed by the cage of the staircase that led to the platform, I saw a cabin 6 feet long, in which Conseil and Ned Land, enchanted with their repast, were devouring it with avidity. Then a door opened in the kitchen, 9 feet long, situated between the large storerooms. There, electricity, better than gas itself, did all the cooking. The streams under the furnaces gave out to the sponges of platina a heat which was regularly kept up and distributed. They also heated a distilling apparatus, which, by evaporation, furnished excellent drinkable water. Near this kitchen was a bathroom comfortably furnished, with hot and cold water taps. Next to the kitchen was the bathroom of the vessel, 16 feet long. But the door was shut, and I could not see the management of it, which might have given me an idea of the number of men employed on board the Nautilus. At the bottom was a fourth partition that separated this office from the engine room. A door opened, and I found myself in the compartment where Captain Nemo, certainly an engineer of a very high order, had arranged his locomotive machinery. This engine room, clearly lighted, did not measure less than 65 feet in length. It was divided into two parts. The first contained the materials for producing electricity, and the second, the machinery that connected it with the screw. I examined it with great interest in order to understand the machinery of the Nautilus. "You see," said the captain, "I use Bunsen's contrivances, not Ruhmkorff's. Those would not have been powerful enough. Bunsen's are fewer in number, but strong and large, which experience proves to be the best. The electricity produced passes forward, where it works, by electromagnets of great size, on a system of levers and cogwheels that transmit the movement to the axle of the screw. This one, the diameter of which is 19 feet and the thread 23 feet, performs about 120 revolutions in a second." "And you get then?" "A speed of 50 miles an hour. I have seen the Nautilus maneuver before the Abraham Lincoln, and I have my own ideas as to its speed, but this is not enough. We must see where we go. I must be able to direct it to the right, to the left, above, below. How do you get to the great depths, where you find an increasing resistance, which is rated by hundreds of atmospheres? How do you return to the surface of the ocean, and how do you maintain yourselves in the requisite medium? Am I asking too much?" "Not at all, Professor," replied the captain, with some hesitation. "Since you may never leave this bemurned boat, come into the saloon. It is a usual study, and there you will learn all you want to know about the Nautilus." Chapter 12. Some figures. I drink some tea. Continuing then. A moment after we were seated on a divan in the salon smoking, a moment after we were seated on a divan in the salon smoking, the captain showed me a sketch that gave the plan, section, and elevation of the Nautilus. Then he began his description in these words: "Here, Mr. Aronnax, are the several dimensions of the boat you are in. It is an elongated cylinder with conical ends. It is very like a cigar in shape, a shape already adopted in London in several constructions of the same sort. The length of this cylinder, from stem to stem, is exactly 232 feet, and its maximum breadth is 26 feet. It is not built quite like your long voyage steamers, but its lines are sufficiently long and its curves prolonged enough to allow the water to slide off easily and pose no obstacle to its passage. These two dimensions enable you to obtain by a simple calculation the surface and cubic contents of the Nautilus. Its area measures 6,032 feet, and its contents about 1,500 cubic yards. That is to say, when completely immersed, it displaces 50,000 feet of water, or weighs 1,500 tons. When I made the plans for the submarine vessel, I meant that 9/10 should be submerged. Consequently, it ought only to displace 9/10 of its bulk, that is to say, only to weigh that number of tons. I would not therefore have exceeded that weight, constructing it on the aforesaid dimensions. The Nautilus is composed of two hulls, one inside, the other outside, joined by T-shaped irons, which render it very strong indeed. Indeed, owing to the cellular arrangement, it resists like a block, as if it were solid. Its sides cannot yield. It coheres spontaneously, and not by the closeness of its rivets. And the homogeneity of its construction, due to the perfect union of the materials, enables it to defy the roughest seas. These two hulls are composed of steel plates, whose density is from 0.7 to 0.8 that of water. The first is not less than 2.5 inches thick and weighs 394 tons. The second envelope, the keel, 20 inches high and 10 thick, weighs alone 62 tons. The engine, the ballast, the several accessories and apparatus appendages, the partitions and bulkheads weigh 961.62 tons. Do you follow all this? I do. Then, when the Nautilus is afloat under these circumstances, 1/10 is off of the water. Now, if I have made reservoirs of size equal to this tenth, or capable of holding 150 tons, and if I fill them with water, the boat weighing then 1,507 tons will be completely immersed. That would happen, Professor. These reservoirs are in the lower parts of the Nautilus. I turn on taps and they fill, and the vessel sinks that had just been level with the surface. Well, Captain, but now we come to the real difficulty. I can understand your rising to the surface, but diving below the surface, does not your submarine contrivance encounter a pressure, and consequently undergo an upward thrust of 1 atmosphere for every 30 feet of water, just about 15 pounds per square inch? Just so, sir. Then, unless you quite fill the Nautilus, I do not see how you can draw it down to those depths. Professor, you must not confound statistics with dynamics, or you will be exposed to grave errors. There is very little labor spent in attaining the lower regions of the ocean, for all bodies have a tendency to sink. When I wanted to find out the necessary increase of weight to sink the Nautilus, I had only to calculate the reduction of volume that seawater acquires according to the depth. That is evident. Now, if water is not absolutely incompressible, it is at least capable of very slight compression. Indeed, after the most recent calculations, this reduction is only 0.0000436 of an atmosphere for each 30 feet of depth. If you want to sink 30,000 feet, I should keep account of the reduction of bulk under a pressure equal to that of a column of water of 1,000 feet. The calculation is easily verified. Now, I have supplementary reservoirs capable of holding 100 tons. Therefore, I can sink to a considerable depth. When I wish to rise to the level of the sea, I only let off the water and empty all the reservoirs if I want the Nautilus to emerge from the 10th part of her total capacity. I had nothing to object to these reasonings. I admit your calculations, Captain, I replied. I should be wrong to dispute them, since daily experience confirms them, but I foresee a real difficulty in the way. What, sir? When you are about 1,000 feet deep, the walls of the Nautilus bear a pressure of 100 atmospheres. If, then, just now, you were to empty the supplementary reservoirs, to lighten the vessel, and go up to the surface, the pumps must overcome the pressure of 100 atmospheres, which is 1,500 pounds per square inch. From that power that electricity alone can give, said the captain hastily. I repeat, sir, that the dynamic power of my engines is almost infinite. The pumps of the Nautilus have an enormous power, as you must have observed when their jets of water burst like a torrent upon the Abraham Lincoln. Besides, I use subsidiary reservoirs only to attain a mean depth of 750 to 1,000 fathoms, and that with a view of managing my machines. Also, when I have a mind to visit the depths of the ocean 5 or 6 miles below the surface, I make use of slower but not less infallible means. What are they, Captain? That involves my telling you how the Nautilus is worked. I am impatient to learn. To steer this boat to starboard or port, to turn, in a word, following a horizontal plan, I use an ordinary rudder fixed on the back of the stern post, and with one wheel and some tackle to steer by, but I can also make the Nautilus rise and sink and rise by a vertical movement by means of 2 inclined planes fastened to its sides, opposite the center of flotation. Planes that move in every direction, and that are worked by powerful levers from the interior. If the planes are kept parallel with the boat, it moves horizontally. If slanted, the Nautilus, according to its inclination, and under the influence of the screw, either sinks diagonally or rises diagonally, as it suits me. And even if I wish to rise more quickly to the surface, I shift the screw, and the pressure of the water causes the Nautilus to rise vertically, like a balloon filled with hydrogen. Bravo, Captain! But how can the steersman follow route in the middle of the waters? The steersman is placed in a glazed box, and that is raised above the hull of the Nautilus, and furnished with lenses. Are these lenses capable of resisting such pressure? Perfectly. Glass, which breaks at a blow, is nevertheless capable of offering considerable resistance. During some experiments of fishing by electric light in 1864 in the northern seas, we saw plates less than a third of an inch thick resist a pressure of 16 atmospheres. Now, the glass that I use is not less than 30 times thicker. Granted, but after all, in order to see, the light must exceed the darkness, and in the midst of the darkness in the water, how can you see? Behind our steersman's cage is placed a powerful electric reflector, the rays from which light up the sea for half a mile in front. Oh, that's a very powerful light. Ah, bravo, Captain. Now I can account for this phosphorescence in the supposed narwhal that puzzled us so. And I'll ask you, if the boarding of the Nautilus and of the Scotia that has made such a noise has been the result of a chancing encounter? Quite accidental, sir. I was sailing only 1 fathom below the surface of the water when the shock came. It had no bad result. None, sir. But now, about your encounter with the Abraham Lincoln? Professor, I am sorry for one of the best vessels in the American Navy, but they attacked me, and I was bound to defend myself. I contented myself, however, with putting the frigate hors de combat. She will not have any difficulty in getting repaired at the next port. Ah, Commander, your Nautilus is certainly a marvelous boat. Yes, Professor, and I love it as if it were a part of myself. If danger threatens one of your vessels of the ocean, the first impression is the feeling of an abyss above and below. On the Nautilus, men's hearts never fail them. Not the facts to be afraid of, for the double shell is as firm as iron. No rigging to attend to, no sails for the wind to carry away, no boilers to burst, no fire to fear, for the vessel is made of iron, not of wood, no coal to run short, for electricity is the only mechanical agent, no collision to fear, for it alone swims in deep water, no tempest to brave, for when it dives below the water, it reaches absolute tranquility. There, sir, that is the perfection of vessels. And if it is true that the engineer has more confidence in the vessel than the builder, and the builder than the captain himself, you understand the trust reposed in my Nautilus, for I am at once captain, builder, and engineer. But how could you construct this wonderful Nautilus in secret? Each separate portion, Mr. Aronnax, was brought from different parts of the globe. The keel was forged at Creusot, the shaft of the screw at Pen and Co's, London, the iron plates of the hull at Laird's of Liverpool, the screw itself at Scott's at Glasgow. The reservoirs were made by Kell Eco at Paris, the engine by Krupp in Prussia, its beak in Motala's workshop in Sweden, its mathematical instruments by Hart Brothers of New York, etc. And each of these people had my orders under different names. But these parts had to be put together and arranged. Professor, I had set up my workshops upon a desert island in the ocean. There my workmen, that is to say, the brave men that I instructed and educated, and myself had put together the Nautilus. Then, when the work was finished, fire destroyed all trace of our proceedings on this island, and that I could have jumped over if I had liked. Then the cost of this vessel is great. Mr. Aronnax, an iron vessel costs 45 euros per ton. Now, the Nautilus weighed 1,500. It came therefore to 67,500 euros, and 8,000 more euros for fitting it up, and about 200,000 euros with the works of art and the collections it contains. One last question, Captain Nemo. Ask it, Professor. You are rich. Immensely rich, sir, and I could, without missing it, pay the national debt of France. I stared at the singular person who spoke thus. Was he playing upon my credulity? The future would decide that. At the time Professor Aronnax wrote, the English pound was worth about $5, so 200,000 euros would be the equivalent of 1 million in US money. Costs run right here for submarines today. Chapter 13. I will take a quick break and I'll be back soon. Beckham. This is non-stop talking, so we really need to have some Then chapter 13. The portion of the terrestrial the Black River. The portion of the terrestrial globe which is covered by water is estimated at upwards of 80 millions of acres. And this fluid mass comprises 2,250,000,000 of cubic miles, forming a spherical body of a diameter of 60 leagues, the weight of which would be 3 quintillions of tons. To comprehend the meaning of these figures, it is necessary to observe that a quintillion is to a billion as a billion is to unity. In other words, there are as many billions in a quintillion as there are units in a billion. This mass of fluid is equal to about the quantity of water which would be discharged by all the rivers of the earth in 40,000 years. Oh, yes. A lot of water. During the geological epochs, the igneous period succeeded to the equals. The ocean originally prevailed everywhere. Then, by degrees, in the Silurian period, the tops of the mountains began to appear. The islands emerged, then disappeared in partial deluges, reappeared, became settled, formed continents, till at the length the earth became geographically arranged, as we see in the present day. Ever shifting. The solid had wrested from the liquid 37,657,000,000 square miles, equal to 12,960,000,000 of acres. The shape of continents allows us to divide the waters into 5 great portions: the Arctic or Frozen Ocean, the Antarctic or Frozen Ocean, the Indian, the Atlantic, and the Pacific Oceans. The Pacific Ocean extends from north to south between the 2 polar circles, and from east to west between Asia and America, over an extent of 145 degrees of longitude. It is the quiet of seas. Its currents are broad and slow. It has medium tides and abundant rain. Such was the ocean that my fate destined me first to travel over under these strange conditions. "Sir," said Captain Nemo, "we will, if you please, take our bearings and fix the starting point of this voyage. It is 11:45. I will go up again to the surface." The captain pressed an electric clock 3 times. The pumps began to drive the water from the tanks. The needle of the manometer marked by a different pressure the ascent of the Nautilus. Then it stopped. "We have arrived," said the captain. I went to the central staircase which opened on the platform, clambered upon iron steps, and found myself on the upper part of the Nautilus. The platform was only 3 feet out of water. The front and back of the Nautilus was of that spindle shape which caused it justly to be compared to a cigar. I noticed that its iron plates, slightly overlaying each other, resembled the shell which clothes the bodies of our large terrestrial reptiles. It explained to me how natural it was, in spite of all glasses, that this boat should have been taken for a marine animal. Towards the middle of the platform, the long boat, half buried in the hull of the vessel, formed a slight excrescence. Fore and aft rose two cages of medium height with inclined sides, and partly closed by thick lenticular glasses, one destined for the steersman, who was directing the Nautilus, the other containing a brilliant lantern to give light on the road. The sea was beautiful, the sky pure. Scarcely could the long vehicle feel the broad undulations of the ocean. A light breeze from the east rippled the surface of the waters. The horizon, free from fog, made observation easy. Nothing was in sight. Not a quicksand, not an island. A vast desert. Captain Nemo, by the help of his sextant, took the altitude of the sun, which ought also to give the latitude. He waited for some moments till its disk touched the horizon, was taking observations, not a muscle moved. The instrument could not have been more motionless in hand of a marble. 12 o'clock, sir, said he. When you like. I cast a look upon the sea, slightly yellowed by the Japanese coast, and descended into the saloon. And now, sir, I leave you to your studies, added the captain. Our course is N. Our depth is 26 fathoms. Here are maps on a large scale by which you may follow it. The saloon is at your disposal, and with your permission, I will retire. Captain Nemo bowed, and I remained alone, lost in thoughts, all bearing on the commander of the Nautilus. For a whole hour I was deep in these reflections, seeking to pierce this mystery so interesting to me. Then my eyes fell upon the vast planisphere spread upon the table, and I placed my finger on the very spot where the given latitude and longitude crossed. The sea has its large rivers like the continents. They are special currents known by their temperature and their color. The most remarkable of these is known by the name of the Gulf Stream. Science has decided on the globe the direction of 5 principal currents, one in the North Atlantic, the second in the south, a third by the North Pacific, a fourth in the south, and a fifth in the southern Indian Ocean. It is even probable that a sixth current existed at one time or another in the northern Indian Ocean, when the Caspian and Aral seas formed but one vast sheet of water. At this point, indicated on the planisphere, one of these currents was howling. The Corno Silvo of the Japanese, the Black River which, leaving the Gulf of Bengal where it is warmed by the perpendicular rays of a tropical sun, crosses the Straits of Malacca along the coast of Asia, turns into the North Pacific to the Aleutian Islands, carrying with its trunks of camphor trees and other indigenous productions, and edging the waves of the ocean with the pure indigo of its warm water. It was this current that the Nautilus was to follow. I followed it with my eye, saw it lose itself in the vastness of the Pacific, and felt myself drawn to it. when Ned Land and Conseil appeared at the door of the saloon. My two brave companions remained petrified at the sight of wonders that spread before them. "Where are we? Where are we?" exclaimed the Canadian. "In the museum at Quebec?" "My friends," I answered, making a sign for them to enter. "You are not in Canada, but on board the Nautilus, 50 yards below the level of the sea." "But, Mr. Aronnax," said Ned Land, "can you tell me how many men there are on board? 10, 20, 50, 100? "I cannot answer you, Mr. Land. It's better to abandon for a time all idea of seizing the Nautilus or escaping from it. This ship is a masterpiece of modern industry, and I should be sorry not to have seen it. Many people would accept the situation forced upon us, if only to move amongst such wonders. So be quiet, and let us try and see what passes around us." "See," exclaimed the harpooner, "but we can see nothing in this iron prison. We are walking, we are sailing blindly." Ned Land had scarcely pronounced these words when all was suddenly darkness. The luminous ceiling was gone, all so rapidly that my eyes received a painful impression. We remained mute, not stirring, and not knowing what surprise awaited us, whether agreeable or disagreeable. A sliding noise was heard. One would have said that panels were working at the sides of the Nautilus. "It is the end of the end," said Ned Land. Suddenly, light broke at each side of the saloon, through two oblong openings. The liquid mass appeared vividly lit from the sea, appeared vividly lit by the electric gleam. Two crystal plates separated us from the sea. At first I trembled at the thought that this frail partition might break, but strong bands of copper bound them, giving an almost infinite power of resistance. The sea was distinctly visible for a mile all around the Nautilus. What a spectacle! What pen can describe it? What could paint the effects of the light through those transparent sheets of water, and the softness of the successive gradations from the lower to the superior strata of the ocean? We know the transparency of the sea, and that its clearness is far beyond that of rock water. The mineral and organic substances which it holds in suspension heightens its transparency. In certain parts of the ocean, at the Antilles, under 75 fathoms of water, can be seen with surprising clearness a bed of sand. The penetrating power of the solar rays does not seem to cease for a depth of 150 fathoms. But in this middle fluid traveled over by the Nautilus, the electric brightness was produced even in the bosom of the waves. It was no longer luminous water, but liquid light. On each side, a window opened into this unexplored abyss. The obscurity of the saloon showed to advantage the brightness outside, and we looked out as if these pure crystals had been the glass of an immense aquarium. "You wish to see, friend Ned? Well, you see now." "Curious, curious," muttered the Canadian, who, forgetting his ill temper, seemed to submit to some irresistible attraction. "And one could come further than this to admire such a sight?" Wonder if he'll give in eventually. They seem quite wonderful. I thought to myself. I understand the life of this man. He has made a world apart for himself, in which he treasures all his great wonders. For 2 whole hours, an aquatic army escorted Nautilus. During their games, their bounds, while rivaling each other in beauty, brightness, and velocity, I distinguished the green labber, the banded mullet, marked by a double line of black, the round-tailed goby, of a white color, with violet spots on the back, the Japanese combros, a beautiful mackerel of the seas, with a blue body of silver head, the brilliant azuros, whose name alone defines description, some banded spares with variegated fins of blue and yellow, some aclostones, the woodcocks of the seas, some specimens of which attain a yard in length, Japanese salamanders, spider lampreys, serpents 6 feet long, with eyes small and lively, and a huge mouth bristling with teeth, with many other species. Our imagination was kept at its height. Interjections followed quickly on each other. Ned named the fish, and Conseil classed them. I was in ecstasies with the vivacity of their movements and the beauty of their forms. Never had it been given to me to surprise these animals, alive and at liberty in their natural element. I will not mention all the verities which passed before my dazzled eyes, all the collection of the seas of China and Japan. These fish, more numerous than the birds of the air, came, attracted, no doubt, by the brilliant focus of the electric light. Suddenly there was daylight in the saloon. The iron panels closed again, and the enchanting vision disappeared. But for a long time I dreamt on till my eyes fell on the instruments hanging on the partition. The compass still showed the course to be NNE. The manometer indicated a pressure of 5 atmospheres, equivalent to the depth of 25 fathoms, and the electric log gave a speed of 15 miles an hour. I expected Captain Nemo, but he did not appear. The clock marked the hour of 5. Ned Land and Conseil returned to their cabin, and I retired to my chamber. My dinner was ready. It was composed of turtle soup made with the most delicate hawk bills, of a surmullet served with puff paste, the liver of which, prepared by itself, was most delicious, and fillets of the imperial holocanthus, the savor of which seemed to me superior even to salmon. I passed the evening reading, writing, and thinking. Then sleep overpowered me, and I stretched myself on my couch of Zostera. I slept profoundly, whilst the Nautilus was gliding rapidly through the current of the Black River. Chapter 14. A Note of Invitation. The next day was the 9th of November. I awoke after a long sleep of 12 hours. Conseil came, according to custom, to know how I had passed the night, and to offer his services. He had left his friend the Canadian sleeping like a man who had never done anything else all his life. I let the worthy fellow chatter as he pleased, without caring to answer him. I was preoccupied by the absence of the captain during our sitting of the day before, and hoping to see him today. As soon as I was dressed, I went into the salon. It was deserted. I plunged into the study of the conchological treasures hidden behind the glasses. I reveled also in great herbals filled with the rarest marine plants, which, although dried up, retained their lovely colors. Amongst these precious hydrophytes were marked some vorticellae, pavonaria, delicate ceramics with scarlet tints, some fan-shaped agari, and some natabuli like flat mushrooms, which at one time used to be classed as zoophytes. Short, perfect series of algae. The whole day passed without my being honored by a visit from Captain Nemo. The panels of the saloon did not open. Perhaps they did not wish us to tire of these beautiful things. The course of the Nautilus was E&E, her speed 12 knots, the depth below the surface between 25 and 30 fathoms. The next day, 10th of November, same desertion, the same solitude. I did not see one of the ship's crew. Ned and Conseil spent the greater part of the day with me. They were astonished at the inexplicable absence of the captain. Is the singular man ill? Had he altered his intentions with regard to us? After all, as Conseil said, we enjoyed perfect liberty. We were delicately and abundantly fed. Our host kept to his terms of the treaty. We could not complain, and, indeed, the singularity of our fate reserved such wonderful compensation for us that we had no right to accuse it as yet. That day I commenced the journal of these adventurers, which had enabled me to relate them with more scrupulous exactitude and minute detail. I wrote it on paper made from the Zostera marina. 11th of November, early in the morning. The fresh air spreading over the interior of the Nautilus told me that we had come to the surface of the ocean to renew our supply of oxygen. I directed my steps to the central staircase and mounted the platform. It was 6 o'clock. The weather was cloudy, the sea grey but calm, scarcely a billow. Captain Nemo, whom I hoped to meet, would he be there? I saw no one but the steersman imprisoned in his glass cage. Seated upon the projection formed by the hull of the Panacea, I inhaled the salt breeze with delight. By degrees the fog disappeared under the action of the sun's rays. The radiant orb rose from behind the eastern horizon. The sea flamed under its glance like a train of gunpowder. The clouds scattered in the heights were colored with lively tints of beautiful shades, and numerous mare's tails which beckoned wind for that day. But what was wind to this Nautilus which tempests could not frighten? I was admiring this joyous rising of the sun, so gay and so life-giving, when I heard steps approaching the platform. I was prepared to salute Captain Nemo, but it was his second, whom I had already seen on the captain's first visit, who appeared. He advanced on the platform, not seeming to see me. With his powerful glass to his eye, he scanned every point of the horizon with great attention. His examination over, he approached the panel and pronounced the sentence in exactly these terms. I have remembered it, for every morning it was repeated under exactly the same conditions. It was thus worded: Nautron respect lorni virt. What it meant, I could not say. These words pronounced, the second descended. I thought that the Nautilus was about to return to its submarine navigation. I regained the panel and returned to my chamber. 5 days sped thus, without any change in our situation. Every morning I mounted the platform. The same phrase was pronounced by the same individual, but Captain Nemo did not appear. I had made up my mind that I should never see him again, when, on the 16th of November, on returning to my room with Ned and Conseil, I found upon my table a note addressed to me. I opened it impatiently. It was written in a bold, clear hand, the characters header pointed, recalling German type. The note was worded as follows. 6th of November, 1867. To Professor Aronnax, on board the Nautilus. Captain Nemo invites Professor Aronnax to a hunting party, which will take place tomorrow morning in the forest of the island of Crespo. He hopes that nothing will prevent the professor from being present, and he will with pleasure see him joined by his companions. Captain Nemo, commander of the Nautilus. A hunt! Exclaimed Ned. And in the forest of the island of Crespo, added Conseil. Oh, then the gentleman is going on terra firma? Replied Ned Land. That seems to me be clearly indicated, said I, reading the letter once more. Well, we must accept, said the Canadian. But once more on dry ground, we shall know what to do. Indeed, I shall not be sorry to eat a piece of fresh venison. Continuing. Not seeking to reconcile what was contradictory between Captain Nemo's manifest aversion to islands and continents and his invitation to hunt in a forest, I contented myself with replying, "Let us first see where the island of Crespo is." I consulted the planisphere, and in 32 degrees 40 north latitude and 157 degrees 50 west longitude, I found a small island recognized in 1801 by Captain Crespo and marked in the ancient Spanish maps as Roca de la Plata, the meaning of which is the Silver Rock. We were then about 1800 miles from our starting point, and the course of the Nautilus, a little changed, was bringing it back towards the southeast. I showed this little rock lost in the midst of the North Pacific to my companions. If Captain Nemo does sometimes go on dry ground, said I, he at least chooses desert islands. Ned Land shrugged his shoulders without speaking, and Conseil and he left me. After supper, which was served by the steward mute and impassive, I went to bed, not without some anxiety. The next morning, the 7th of November, on awakening, I felt that the Nautilus was perfectly still. I dressed quickly and entered the saloon. Captain Nemo was there, waiting for me. He rose, bowed, and asked me if it was convenient for me to accompany him. As he made no allusion to his absence during the last 8 days, I did not mention it, and simply answered that my companions and myself were ready to follow him. We entered the dining room, where breakfast was served. "Mr. Aronnax," said the captain, "pray share my breakfast without ceremony. We will chat as we eat. For though I promised you a walk in the forest, I did not undertake to find hotels there. So breakfast as a man who will most likely not have his dinner till very late." I did the honor to the repast. It was composed of several kinds of fish and slices of holoturidae, excellent zoophytes, and different sorts of seaweed. Our drink consisted of pure water, to which the captain added some drops of a fermented liquor, extracted by the Kamchatka method from a seaweed known under the name of Rhodomelia palmata. Captain Nemo ate at first without saying a word. Then he began. "Sir, when I proposed to you to hunt in my submarine forest of Crespo, you evidently thought me mad. Sir, you should never judge lightly of any man." "But, Captain, believe me." "Be kind enough to listen, and you will then see whether you have any cause to accuse me of folly and contradiction. I listen." "You know as well as I do, Professor, that man can live underwater, providing he carries with him a sufficient supply of breathable air. The submarine works. The workman, clad in an impervious dress, with his head in a metal helmet, receives air from above by means of forcing pumps and regulators." "That is a diving apparatus," said I. "Just so. But under these conditions, the man is not at liberty. He is attached to the pump which sends him air through an india rubber tube, and if he were obliged to be thus held to the Nautilus, he could not go far." "And the means of getting free," I asked, "is to use the Royal Coil apparatus invented by 2 of your own countrymen, which I have brought to perfection for my own use, and which I will allow you to risk yourself under these new physiological conditions, without any organ or whatever suffering. It consists of a reservoir of thick iron plates, in which I store the air under a pressure of 50 atmospheres. This reservoir is fixed on the back by means of braces, like a soldier's knapsack. Its upper part forms a box in which the air is kept by means of a bellows, and therefore cannot escape unless at its normal tension. In the Rocaille apparatus which we use, 2 india rubber pipes leave this box and join a sort of tent which holds the nose and mouth. One is to introduce fresh air, the other to let out the foul, and the tongue closes one or the other according to the wants of the respirator. But I, encountering great pressures at the bottom of the sea, was obliged to shoot my head, like that of a diver, in a ball of copper. And it is to this ball of copper that the two pipes, the inspirator and the expirator, open. Perfectly, Captain Nemo. But the air that you carry with you must soon be used, but only contains 15% oxygen. It is no longer fit to breathe. Right, but I told you, Mr. Aronnax, that the pumps of the Nautilus allow me to store the air under considerable pressure, and on these conditions the reservoir of the apparatus can furnish breathable air for 9 or 10 hours. I have no further objections to make, I answered. I will only ask you one thing, Captain. How can you light your road at the bottom of the sea? If the Ruhmkorff apparatus, Mr. Aronnax, one is carried on the back, the other is fastened to the waist. It is composed of a Bunsen pile, which I do not work with bichromate of potash, but with sodium. A wire is introduced which collects the electricity produced and directs it towards a particularly made lantern. In this lantern is a spiral glass which contains a small quantity of carbonic gas. When the apparatus is at work, this gas becomes luminous, giving out a white and continuous light. Thus provided it can breathe and I can see. Captain Nemo, to all my objections you make such crushing answers that I dare no longer doubt. But if I am forced to admit the Ruhmkorff and Ruhmkorff apparatus, I must be allowed some reservations with regard to the gun I am to carry. But it is not a gun for powder, answered the captain. Then it is an air gun? Doubtless. How would you have me manufacture gunpowder on board without either saltpeter, sulfur, or charcoal? Besides, I added, to fire underwater in a medium 855 times denser than the air, we must conquer very considerable resistance. That will be no difficulty. The resist guns, according to Fulton, perfected in England by Philip Coles and Burley, in France by Furcy, and in Italy by Landi, which are furnished with a peculiar system of closing, which can fire underwater in these conditions. But I repeat, having no powder, I use air under great pressure, which the pumps of the Nautilus furnish abundantly. But this air must be rapidly used? Well, have I not my Rocaille reservoir, which can furnish it at need? A tap is all that is required. Besides, Mr. Aronnax, you must see yourself that, during your submarine hunt, we can spend but little air, and but a few balls. But it seems to me that in this twilight, and in the midst of this fluid, which is very dense compared with the atmosphere, shots could not go far, nor easily prove mortal. Sir, on the contrary, with this gun every blow is mortal, and however slightly the animal is touched, it falls as if struck by a thunderbolt. Why? Because the balls sent by this gun are not ordinary balls, but little cases of glass, invented by Lenickbrock, an Australian chemist, of which I have a large supply. These glass cases are covered with a case of steel and weighted with a pellet of lead, and they are real Leyden bottles, into which the electricity is forced to a very high tension. With the slightest shock they are discharged, and the animal, however strong it may be, falls dead. I must tell you that these cases are size number 4, and that the charge for an ordinary gun would be 10. I will argue no longer, I replied, rising from the table. I have nothing left for me but to take my gun. At all events, I will go where you go. Captain Nemo then led me aft, and in passing before Conseil's cabin, I called my two companions, who followed me immediately. We then came to a kind of cell near the machinery room, in which we were put on our walking dress. I think I will end it here today. It's been 3 hours. I still haven't gotten used to talking for this long. We'll continue on chapter 15 next Sunday. Have a good day or night, everyone. Bye. I'm not sure there's a schedule yet for this week. Probably be posted soon. I'll be finishing Child of Light. Bye.